Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Ford Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
It's the Ford Tire Change podcast, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Dawson Iserlo back with you. We are down to 8 drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. What a race at the Charlotte Roval. Some intrigue. The ending, not quite as dramatic, but the points bubble, of course, always has some things to figure out at the end. And now we move on with a chance to crown a NASCAR champion in just over a month. So exciting things happening in the world of the Cup Series. Let's dive on into it. We'll start with the Roval, of course. We went into this week, and I talked about it last week. It was about Shane van Gisbergen, but without him being in the playoff mix, right, it's really kind of coming down to, can someone beat him to grab themselves 5 playoff points, maybe get themselves into the next round of the playoffs if it was somebody like Bubba or Tyler Reddick who was trying to get their way in? Or is he going to win the race, and is it going to be about points? And ultimately, it was about points because SVG did it again. So I know we'll focus on the playoff bubble, but let's at least talk about what SVG accomplished this year. Now that we feel like, this is kind of his season. I don't want to say it's over because he's got a chance to go out and compete the rest of the way, but we don't expect him to win another race. Maybe Talladega proves otherwise. It's the most dominant road course season we've ever seen in NASCAR history. I think that goes without saying. 5 wins in 6 road course races. It was unbelievable. And 5 straight as well. That's really just kind of unlike, I get, we don't have a huge sample size because we didn't go to 6 road courses for a large history of the sport. But, to have also this era of NASCAR, I do think it's a fair, it's a fair thing to bring up when you talk about Jeff Gordon's dominance on the road courses throughout his career, and it was, and I don't think we can take away from it. But obviously, we can also recognize that the gap between the cars was much, much bigger when Jeff Gordon was racing, right? When he was in a Hendrick car, he had an advantage when he showed up to the track each and every Sunday. SVG doesn't have that, right? Especially, at the road courses, we've seen how much parity there's been before he arrived, where you had drivers like Michael McDowell jumping up and winning a race, and you had, Chase Elliott had a nice stretch for him, but then it was starting to trade hands, and, you'd have a win for Christopher Bell, you'd have a win for, somebody else who'd hop up and win that given week. We know these cars have a similar amount of speed at these places, so he's doing this in a lot of ways off of just being better than everyone else, and that's crazy. Now, if we're going to be fair, the same way you could talk about the car being an advantage for Gordon in his time, well, SVG's background is an advantage for him, right? He has way more experience on these types of circuits and certainly driving these types of cars. We know that the next-gen car lends itself to kind of a supercar type feel at the road courses, and so that's always been an advantage for SVG as well. So I don't want to act like he has, level playing field with everyone else the way Gordon had an advantage. He does have an advantage as well, but it's different. So I think it's the most dominant road course season we've ever seen. And while, the future of the schedule, like I said, could you see a couple less road courses here or there? Yeah, and whether you go to a street course in a given year or not, and the next year you got San Diego, so that'll replace, kind of replaces Mexico, but also Chicago going out of the window. You're going to see fewer of them, I think, than 6, but you're not going to see 1 or 2 the way it once was. Like, SVG's going to have a chance to win these races, and he's going to be in the playoffs every year as long as the playoffs are about winning a race and getting in. Now, that could be changing. The playoff format could be changing altogether, and we'll wait and see. They have not made a decision yet. You had another update from Steve Phillips in NASCAR, basically said we're not going to make a decision until after the championship. We're going to talk about these things, and we're going to figure it out. So we'll get there when we get there. But the point is, and winning races is always going to be valuable to NASCAR teams, whether it comes with a playoff spot or not. And Shane van Gisbergen is going to be winning races in the NASCAR Cup Series as long as he's in the series and as long as they're going to road courses, which I think both of those things, your answer could be for the foreseeable future. So incredible job by the 88 team. He has a battle, and Larson looks like he's going to come up and do it. And I just think it's we've seen it all year long. SVG, I don't want to say he plays around with these guys, but he knows, I don't need to win the first stage to win the race. I don't need to lead every lap to win the race. And when it's time to go, he goes, and he's got a different gear that the rest of these guys just haven't found yet. So he wins the race. It's another incredible moment for him. But past that, you look at this playoff bubble, and you look at the 8 cars that advanced. And, there was a little less drama than maybe usual. It was down to Logano, though, and that got heated at the very end. Is it going to be Chastain or Logano? And then Chastain supposedly had the point, but then didn't know he had the point, but then maybe he didn't. And you go through all the different scenarios of it. He tries to make the move on Hamlin, doesn't work out. Then Denny Hamlin comes back and says, yeah, if I knew the situation, I might have not, basically implies he wouldn't have defended as hard because Chastain making it through might have been better for him than Logano. Like it's fun. It's fun, and it's why if you're a person that's for the playoff format right now, you point to that type of battle, for whatever they're battling for, 6th place, 8th place, whatever it is, and you go, that goes away if we go to season-long points formats. And I understand that, and that's why I get both sides of it. I do think there's at least a happy medium. I think the current format is way too contingent on getting hot at the right time as opposed to rewarding season-long performance. But we will see where they go. Not to turn this into a playoff format conversation. So Chastain's out and Logano's in, which means we only have 3 teams represented in the round of 8. It is your 3 heavy hitters, right? It is Penske, it is Gibbs, and it is Hendrick. And those 3 teams will make up the entire field of 8. So obviously your champion will come from one of those 3 teams as well. And that is not new or a surprise. Penske has won a handful of championships here in recent years, and we know when they haven't, it's been the Hendrick guys getting it done as well. And Joe Gibbs racing for, the 3rd option. So it will be, I think, fascinating to see all the heavy hitters kind of, fighting for those 4 spots. You look at the bubble, it's interesting, man. You got those top 4 that are all, within 4 points of each other, and I believe it's C. Bell who's in 5th, who's only 4 points below. But then you have Elliott and Briscoe, 14 points to make up. Like, they have a pretty significant gap. And then Logano's got a lot of ground to make up. He's going to have to potentially win a race here. But at the same time, I feel like anytime you have a super speedway in a round of the playoffs, the gaps are less significant in some ways because there's going to be some drivers out of these 8 cars who have issues at Talladega. It feels inevitable, right? It'd be a stunner to me if all 8 drivers finished in the top 15 or so because somebody's going to get caught up in somebody else's accident. Somebody's going to be in the big one. Whatever may happen, happens, and that can change that points bubble drastically. So it is an advantage to still be at the top where Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin sit. But it's also still a situation where I think you've got to find a way to get 3 good finishes. Las Vegas, Talladega, Martinsville are the 3 races. 3 very different styles of tracks, which I like in some ways when you're switching it up. So you'll go to a 1.5 miles to start it off, then you'll head to a super speedway where anything can happen, and then you'll finish it off with an old school short track. And I think that could lend itself to some chaos here within these 4. I still think Denny Hamlin's got a good shot. You wonder if the momentum's going to be there. You kind of question, really who has the biggest advantage? Is it Penske because of all their success in the playoffs in recent years and their ability to get to Phoenix and have the best car when they get there? I still feel like Christopher Bell's been waiting, for his moment forever, and maybe it's this time around. William Byron, kind of the same way. Those 2 guys have shown you over and over again that they're right on the cusp of breaking out. But it will be interesting to see. And the 3 teams being represented is interesting. Like if Chastain would have made it, you'd have had 4, you'd have had Trackhouse. Maybe you feel a little bit differently about it. But I saw some arguments about the new potential format being all about the bigger teams, right? Instead of giving some love spread all the way around. Well, a year like this one goes, hey, it's not like the current format's promoting, the 7th best team in the sport to win championships. Like we've got the 3 best teams left with 8 cars in the round of 8. So it is interesting, like all the different ways you can talk about this format, all the different ways you can argue about it. I understand it from the different viewpoints, but at the same time, it's a really difficult decision. It's one of those things where you don't want to be dramatic about it because they can always go back and change their mind a couple years down the road if it doesn't work out. But it feels like we're creating a pivot point in the history of the sport of NASCAR in some ways with the new car that we've already rolled out, and you've seen some of the advantages and plenty of the disadvantages that it has brought with it. And now you're potentially talking about changing a format that's been in place for the better part of a decade, right? Slight tweaks here and there. And maybe even rolling it all the way back to the classic days of NASCAR when you had season-long points. Like that is a big-time pivot point in the history of the sport, in my opinion. And I'll be fascinated to see what they do, and they've got to make that decision. So, at the same time, I wanted to kind of have the conversation of this year separate from the playoff format, but it's hard to do because it just feels like that's really the most important thing that NASCAR has to get decided shortly after the season is over. So, all that being said, as far as Las Vegas itself, you're talking about another 1.5 miles. You're going to see who brings the most speed. I do expect, I said at Talladega, I don't think the top 8 is going to finish all the way close. I expect us to see probably 6, 7 of these guys in the top 10. I think they're going to be the ones battling it out for the win. I think you very easily could see multiple playoff drivers battling with each other for the race victory, and we know how important it is to win at Vegas. If you can win at Vegas and you're a round of 8 driver and you don't have to go to Talladega with the stress of trying to get points or stage points or, avoid a big wreck, it just takes so much pressure off the driver and the team, and it allows you to think about Phoenix and then think about, maybe grabbing a win if the opportunity presents itself, but it doesn't mean as much as it does if you don't win at Vegas. So I'll take Denny Hamlin. Why not? Feels like it's a year of destiny. I've been saying that it feels like 4 or 5 years now, but maybe this year that it does happen for him. He's got to win a championship at some point, right? I guess we keep asking that question. But if he does it, he's going to have to go through all the heavy hitters as we've been discussing this entire time. So that'll do it for this week's episode, 4 Tire Change. We'll see what Vegas looks like. The NASCAR playoffs roll on. Plenty of excitement left to be had. If you wouldn't mind, please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll keep things rolling. It's 4 Tire Change, signing out.